I have two studios. This one here in Morocco and a much bigger one in Barcelona. My Barcelona studio is acoustically treated. It has bigger monitors, hardware, synth, basically everything you would expect from a professional studio. It sounds great, it has everything I need, but mostly I know it very well. And strangely enough, having the big studio taught me that I probably don't need a big studio. I spent a lot of time in Morocco, so originally I thought the obvious thing to do was to build another studio here in Rabat. A copy of Barcelona, or at least a smaller copy of the Barcelona studio. But the more I thought about it, and the more I realized that this was the completely wrong idea. I didn't need the same studio. I needed the same core. So I started to ask myself a very simple question. What do I actually need to make music? What are the things I really depend on every day? And what is it just nice to have? And what is it that I can leave behind? For me, the core is actually very simple. It's a computer, a Mac in my case, a good audio interface, more on that later, a monitoring system I know, and of course my software. And on top of that, just to make my life a little bit easier, enough physical control to make the computer feel like an instrument and not just an office machine. And once I reduced everything to that, the whole idea of the second studio changed. The first decision I had to make was the interface. I had to think about how to change the interface in the big studio first, because I was using a rack-mounted interface and Aurora Lynx, which was very good interface, top of the game actually. So what do I replace it with? I can't take that interface around the world with me. So I thought about the way I work. The way I like to record is I like to print things on the computer with the sound I like. So I needed an interface that let me do that. And with all the research I've made, the Apollo Twin X from UAD was the one that would let me do that. But you could do the same thing with any other modern interface, like an SSL or a Focusrite or whatever you like to use. In my case, it's because I wanted to print sound on recording, which, by the way, you can do with another interface. It's just that the Apollo was, in my opinion, the one that gives me the most flexibility. But you could also decide to record through clean preamp of an SSL, for example, and process the sound after. That's a completely okay technique. I do that a lot as well. So the interface is not important. What's important is the consistency. Right, once I had the interface sorted, second biggest problem obviously was monitoring. In the studio I have ADAM, A7X. They sound great, but they sound great because they have the room around. If you put those speakers into a bedroom in a flat, it's going to sound terrible. So I got for the big studio, as small reference speakers, I got iLoud speakers, and I soon realized that I was doing a lot of my mixing on those. Then I knew I had my answer. You put them on your desktop so close you can't hear the room. It sounds exactly the same in Barcelona or in Morocco. To complete this speaker system, you need a good headphone, because it is actually totally okay to work on headphones and even mix on headphones. And for that I followed Andrew Shop's advice. I actually bought those Sony MDR, I think they are 7506 or something like that. Those ones. Very cheap, not the best hi-fi, but amazing on mixing because they are so flat and so raw that you're not going to make much mistakes with those. I've also noticed that they translate really well with the iLoud. When I do something on the iLoud and I switch to the headphones, I don't have massive surprises. It's more or less the same. Now, the biggest difference is the fact that in Barcelona I have a lot of hardware. This equipment is actually very old as well. Some of those machines are like 30 years old, and you know, I know them really well. They sound really good. Obviously, I can't take that rack with me every time I travel. That would be crazy. So how do I work without that hardware, knowing that I like to print, for example, my guitar or a vocal going through the hardware? Well, that's why I choose the UAD. It's because it's one interface that allows me to use plugin simulation without any latency. I can recreate not exactly the same sound, but it sounds as good. It's different. So I went to buy, you know, the thing that I needed, like API preamps, SSL EQ, Neve preamps, lots of things like that I like to use, and I print using them. Now, obviously, if I want, I can always go back to the big studio and process the sound again through the hardware. This is what I thought I would do, but in fact, I realize now that I never had to do that. I go back to the big studio to mix. I'm usually very happy with the sound I printed in the first place in the small studio. So all that to say that surprisingly, I don't really miss my hardware. And what actually surprised me even more is that sometime I am in the Barcelona studio with my hardware and I don't use it. For certain things, I go back to the plugins. So I'm not trying to tell you that a plugin sounds exactly the same as a hardware. They don't sound the same. They sound different, but they are both great to use. Same thing with synth. In the studio I've got hardware synth, but I also have a lot of soft synth in the Mac, and I started to use the soft synth a lot. Some synth that I have hardware and soft, and I prefer to use the soft version because it's a lot easier to use. And my philosophy is that I don't want to spend days trying to figure out and read a manual. I want to make music, so I want to push a button and it works. And very often the software is very simple and the hardware is a bit of a headache. So I go for the simple way. Now, the last thing I really wanted to keep was a controller to control the DAW and control certain things. I've had lots of things in the studio over the years. I had massive controllers, you know, from Mackie, and I had a desk, I had all sorts of things. And in the end, I created this system, which I've made a video about, with two iPads and a FaderPort. I actually love the FaderPort because I realized that I work on one track at a time. And if I need to balance 8 tracks, I can do that on a simple iPad using the V-Control application or the Yukon Avid app. So what I did is that I got another iPad secondhand. I got actually an iPad Air, first generation. I got it for 25 euros secondhand. And that gives me 8 channels at a time. So if I want to kind of submix my drums on the fly, you know, I can just do that with the iPad. And on the side I've got my FaderPort, which cost around 100 euros. So I bought one for Barcelona and one for Rabat. And that gives me all the flexibility I need, not using the mouse that much. And finally, I don't use microphone a lot But again, in the studio I have a good collection of mics. Same problem, I don't want to travel around with my suitcase of microphones. So I started to look around and I found this copy of AKG 414, which is made by Beileifi, Chinese brand, and it sounds amazing. And again, of course, if I have a 414, I'll use it. But when I'm in Morocco, I use this one, the Beileifi, the copy. It does the job on my acoustic guitar, vocals, or percussions I want to record. Well, as you can see, most of the sound I produced can be done in both setups because the core of the studio does not change. Of course, if I want to record my acoustic nylon guitar, I would try to do the final take in the big studio because I have the equipment there, I've got the sound. I also have different guitars, so I can choose which one I like to use. In the big studio, I've got lots of percussions, lots of different things that, they're like toys I can use to, to boost my creativity, Depending on the day, I will pick up this or that. But I didn't want that to be a limitation to the music I create. In some projects, you will find some tracks that have been entirely recorded in Morocco and the other one entirely done in the big studio, and no one has ever called me back saying, oh, I can see that it's been recorded in a different place. It's my music, I know what I'm doing, I know what I want, and I use what I have. Do you need a big studio to make your music? No, you don't. It's nice to have a nice space, at least a nice room. Try to make your room comfortable, and mostly try to make your room easy to operate, so that whenever you want to make music, you make music. You don't do other things like connecting this to that, and because that doesn't work or whatever. Have a simple system that works all the time. Right? Hope that was useful. See you soon. Ciao.